Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Unbreakable Her podcast, where we make space for the stories of resilient women. I'm your host, Monique James, and I'm excited to talk to you today about secondary infertility. That is our topic today. So, trigger warning: this could potentially be triggering if that is something that you are acquainted with and don't feel like it's the right time to engage with the topic. Please do not. There will be plenty of other episodes that you can engage with. So please take care of yourself. On last week's episode, we heard a very powerful story from Janiqua Combs about her journey through infertility to fertility and also experiencing pregnancy loss or child loss. So I was inspired by that conversation to basically keep it going because infertility is a very big topic. And it is nuanced and there are many different lanes. And so secondary infertility is a lane that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much. So I thought it would be a good time to bring it forward and talk about that topic. So that is what we're going to do today. We're going to explore the topic of secondary infertility through a story that is told by our guest today. I'm kidding. I don't have a guest. I'm actually going to tell my story of secondary infertility. So that's what we're doing today. Secondary infertility is a topic that is left off a lot. So I think it's a good time to explore it. So let's start with some statistics. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, about 1 in 5 women experience infertility. And more than half of those cases are what's called secondary infertility, which is defined as when someone who has already had a successful pregnancy can't conceive again. So it's a complicated kind of grief, and it's one that sits within gratitude because really it's sitting side by side with gratitude because there's already been at least one successful pregnancy. There is a child present. So that's where the gratitude comes from. And also the sadness of having the choice taken away. So today I am sharing my own story. It's not really super dramatic. It's not really that loud, but it is honest. And my hope is that after hearing this story, that we'll all be more mindful of how to handle women of childbearing age, how to handle conversations around infertility, and to be mindful of the fact that even women who have children could be going through this kind of infertility. I think a good place to start my story is to just talk about how I felt about children and the idea of parenting. I never wanted anything to do with being a parent. I did not want to be a mom. My entire life felt like, from everything that I saw, parenting was the most difficult job in the history of jobs, and I didn't want to do it. I also did not have a sort of natural affinity for children. I wasn't one of those people who always wanted to hold babies or see babies. When people will come to church, after having a baby, and everybody would be so excited to see, oh, look at me. I was like, hey, look over there, a human. Okay, bye. So just wasn't an interest for me. Children were not an interest for me. And so that's really what I thought my entire life. Fast forward to I am older when I actually get married. So I got married at 38. And leading up to getting married, my now husband and I had conversations, of course, about children and whether or not we wanted that. And we both felt like, so I'd never been pregnant. He didn't have any children either. And so we felt like if God decided that parenting was something, a journey that we should take, then we would take it. So, but there was never oh, I hope we have 3 children and we got it. There was none of that. We were both open, but not settled on it is a must. So we get married in November of 2019, and my husband had a dream. I think it was right before we got married or either right after we got married. It was either the week before or the week after. I can't remember, but he tells me this dream. He had a dream that I was pregnant with twins and that we found out on at a watch night service. This is in the dream. So if you're not familiar with church culture, New Year's Eve service is called watch night. And so it would have been December 31st. So in the dream, we find out watch night service like at church that somehow that I'm pregnant with twins. He tells me this and I was like, bruh, I, that is not, I don't want to see that dream happen at all because twins, oh my gosh. So we're going on about our married life. And I do not remember what prompted me to take a pregnancy test. I do not know what prompted it, but, and I didn't realize this until later, I took a pregnancy test on December 31st of 2019. So now we are 7 weeks into being married, and I find out on December 31st that I am pregnant. Um, it was wow. And to also add in, we were, we abstained until marriage. So we were not intimate before then, and so we were 7 weeks, and then we finally went to the doctor. I was 4 weeks pregnant, so we were 7 weeks into being married, and I was 4 weeks pregnant. So I feel like our reproductive systems were like, "Yay, finally," and just, like, got to work. So, yeah, that happened. So I find out I'm pregnant, and then this is all right before COVID. So everything kind of starts shutting down right as I reached the end of the first trimester. So we had heard the heartbeat. Again, it's really early. We'd heard the heartbeat of the baby, but we hadn't had an ultrasound. We had no sonogram pictures. We had none of that. And at weeks, I think it was like week 12 when we went to maternal fetal medicine. And when we got there, it was time to see like the first image of the baby. So this was all very, very exciting. We hear the heartbeat, we see the baby. I'm also double checking to make sure there aren't two. And so I was like, there's only one, right? And so the tech was like, yes, everything looks good. She was measuring, doing all the stuff that they do. So the tech keeps asking me if something hurts or, have I had any pain or discomfort? And I'm like, no. And we just, as she keeps going on, at first the questions were what they were, and then my spidey senses are going up a little bit. Mind you, my husband is over there just so excited to see this ultrasound. So eventually she brings the doctor in, and the doctor asks me again. And then I said, no, I don't have any pain, but she shows me on the screen and she's like, you see this? She's like, it looks like you have one or two cysts. It looks like you have cysts. So I was like, what? Okay. And so I get, ready to go, and we leave. She tells me that she's going to refer me to a doctor to have them look at it, right? So I am processing all of that. My husband, not so much. We get to the car, and I just want to say that I was really, I don't, I'll say it like this. I wasn't upset, but I was a little bit annoyed because I'm looking at him like, you didn't hear what she said? You didn't hear her say that I have cysts or potentially or something. You didn't hear that? And he's like looking at the pictures and just so excited. And he's like, everything will be fine. I was like, all right, bro. Like it's like, oh my gosh. And in hindsight, it would not have helped if he had been worried and expressive about that worry. That would not have been helpful. So even though I was like, I need you to at least acknowledge that there's potentially something wrong. I did later appreciate the fact that he was like, everything's gonna be fine, you know? So so that happens. The doctor calls me later and she says, here's the referral. I'm referring you to an oncologist. So my mother had breast cancer. I know what an oncologist is. I'm like, pardon me, excuse me. Now we're on the phone, so she can't see my expression, but she does say, I know that sounds daunting, but this is the doctor. I'm not saying that you have cancer. I'm telling you that this is the doctor that handles these kinds of situations. I say, okay. I make the call. I go in to see this doctor along with my husband. We go. They do some more imaging and we have a conversation. And this was the first time that I could feel what they were talking about. So this doctor presses directly on the cysts, and I can feel them at this point. I'm like, whoa, okay, that all right. And so the doctor and there was a resident, and this woman was incredible. There were so many times throughout the process that she was just the rock of the whole situation. And my surgeon was awesome too, but just his resident really, really stood out. Anyway, we are in having this conversation, and he's explaining that there's one cyst on each ovary, and that they need to be removed. And at this time, I am about 13 weeks pregnant. And I am saying a surgery while I am pregnant. That seems scary. And he assures me that that it can be done safely without harming the baby. They also, at this time, let me know that the goal would be to go in, remove the cysts, leave the ovaries intact, but that there is a possibility with these kinds of surgeries that the ovaries will also have to be removed. They also note that there's a concern that the cysts are cancerous. So they have to send me for blood work to get some more information about that. In that conversation, they ask my husband if he has any questions. And at this point, it's funny to me now because he my husband is Jamaican and he has an accent, but it's the strongest when he's speaking to other Jamaican people. So I never saw him do that in mixed company, right? When these people asked him in the doctor's office, he was so I think nervous about everything that he said, "Me, I just worry about she." And I was like, "Sir, it's going to be okay, remember?" Um, it's only funny in hindsight. I didn't think it was funny then, but I noticed that he just was, you know, beside himself. So I'm looking at him like, man, he's really nervous. I didn't know, I didn't feel anxious about it in the moment. I was like, okay, we just need to figure out what's going on. So go get the blood work done, come back for another visit, have a conversation. Okay, so here's what the blood work says. What are you thinking? And I asked the doctor. He's like, well, there's no way for to know. But and I said, listen, you said you've done 30,000 of these in your experience. What does this mean? What do the numbers in this blood work typically mean? And he said, well, some of them are high and meaning that they are indicators that would be positive for cancer. But we can't know until we get in, and we'll remove them and then send them to pathology for biopsy. Okay. So we get and then I go back to my OB. This is all in the same hospital system. I go back to my OB between that visit and then when the surgery was scheduled. And I have a conversation with her, and she has now seen the blood work and all of that. So this is how she explains things to me. She says, mind you, I do want to say that I felt very cared for. I did not feel dismissed in my pregnancy process at all. Listened to. I very specifically wanted um, a black OB, and she is, but part of a system. So it wasn't. I wasn't guaranteed to have her deliver my child, but I did see her for most of my visits. So again, I felt very much cared for, listened to, all of that. So I go on, and this is what she says to me. She says, "So what we're gonna do is," so I asked her. Let me just say this part. I asked her. I said, "Well, can we just wait until after the baby is born? Because I never knew these things were here. They didn't bother me. I'm not having any pain." And she said, "No, because when you have cysts on your ovaries, they will twist on the fallopian tubes, and then you'll be in an emergency surgery situation." So I was like, okay. So she then says to me that you're going to go in for the surgery. Once they are removed, we will stage it. These are her words. We will stage it, and then we will get the baby to viability, take the baby, and start treatment. So she was pretty sure that I had cancer. Not because she had seen the biopsy. This is based on her experience. So she was saying, and part of it, I think, is she's also giving me worst case scenario. But this is what she says to me. I say, okay, and go in for surgery. Let me make a note of the fact that I had to go to surgery by myself. I had to get dropped off. It was COVID. I think it was March, April. It was like April. Yeah. I think it was April or May that I had my surgery. So in any event, I had to go by myself. I had to get dropped off. God is good. I'll say that. I get dropped off. I'm about to go into the surgery. The anesthesiologist comes in. He's going through things with me. Mind you, I don't have anybody there with me. So I'm trying to intently listen to what the anesthesiologist is saying. Usually the surgeon, well, I can't say usually, like I've had a bunch of surgeries, but I just, I would have expected to see my surgeon first, along with the anesthesiologist, but I didn't. So he tells me, the anesthesiologist says, I'll be right back. I'm going to give you a med that will start the process, and start to, basically start making you a little groggy as you go into the operating room. And I say, okay. But he's reading through my chart. He's making a note of everything. And he says everything like, it's this, you cis, blah, 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 blah. But he doesn't say, he doesn't mention the fact that I'm pregnant. So I say, hey, just want to make a note. You didn't note it, so I'm going to. I am 17 weeks pregnant. And he goes, what? He's like, they're supposed to. So he goes through the chart and it is there. But apparently they normally, I guess, like the intake people or the nurse or somebody would normally mark it, and they did not. So the med that he was about to give me to go into the OR is a med that has been associated with birth defects. Now, the it was like, the percentage was really, really low, but thank God. Okay, so I get wheeled into the operating room completely awake. Like it's the weirdest experience. It looks like something out of a movie. It's like this cold, um, dreary place. It's a whole thing. The anesthesiologist is extremely, uh, I should say, he's all business. He's not mean or anything, but he is not moving with care. And I guess I'm not even going to speculate as to why. In any event, the resident that I mentioned earlier, incredible. She starts talking directly to me, and it's kind of like, I got you. This is what's happening. We're going to do this. Don't worry. I'll be here the whole time. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So off to sleep I go. Surgery happens. Wake up. And as I'm waking, this the resident says to me, we got she says there's no cancer. We don't believe it's cancerous. And she's like excited about that. And then her countenance drops and she says, but we did have to take the ovaries. Okay, so now I'm coming out of anesthesia, but I distinctly remember this. And I'm like, okay, I don't have cancer. And that was the thing that I pretty much stuck on. And I wasn't really thinking about the fact that they took my ovaries. So when I finally do wake up and I'm all awake, the resident comes in and she talks to me about the surgery, and she has like the pictures from the surgery. So she shows me the pictures of the cysts. And if you remember, I was saying that I asked my OB, could we wait? And she said no, because they'll twist. In the picture, they had already started to twist. And so I was it would have been an emergency soon. So thankfully, that didn't happen. So she gives me the picture. She said, yeah, we got the cyst, but we had to take your ovaries. And so she says that. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm alive. I don't have cancer. And there's that. I don't have ovaries either. Right. So I'm not 100% processing, the fact that I don't have ovaries anymore until I get home and I read the surgery report. In the surgery report, it says that, and this was arthroscopic, so they went in with the scope. The surgery report says they went in, searched for ovarian tissue, didn't find any. Did it again, searched for ovarian tissue, didn't find any. So the conclusion, there was no viable ovarian tissue. Like literally, if I could show you this surgery report right now, no viable ovarian tissue. So it was at that point that I realized, oh, I don't have ovaries. And it kind of seems like at some point before the surgery, I didn't have them. So this very, odd situation. Going to, recovering from surgery was awful. It was very, very painful. Thank God for my husband. It was just for probably like 2 weeks. It was horrible. Just I needed help to do everything. And I was pregnant. So it was just a lot. I go back for my follow-up probably 2 weeks later, and the surgeon says to me, he uses this word that I can't remember now, but it basically means you're discharged. Like I don't need to see you anymore because there was no cancer. So that's the first gift and blessing. Then he says, it is a miracle you even got pregnant. And at that moment is when I realized when that report says there's no viable ovarian tissue, if you understand how babies are made, the egg is in the ovaries. Where, how, how we get an egg with no ovaries? The cysts had basically destroyed my ovaries, both of them. The cysts were grapefruit sized. And another note is that I never would have known I had them if I wasn't pregnant because I had no pain. It would have likely been them twisting or rupturing that would have sent me into an emergency type situation. But otherwise, because I had no reason to get my womb checked. Like there would have been no reason for me to get an ultrasound of my womb with nothing in there and no pain. So here I am realizing that God has really blessed us, and I'm amazed at his sovereignty, at his grace for us. And then I'm like, whoa, okay. Now let me back up and say, because I had never been pregnant, when I got married, I basically figured that a miscarriage or two might be in the cards. Not, I don't like saying in the cards. Might be something that we would experience simply because that's what I saw other people experience who um, maybe got married later in life, tried to get pregnant later in life. Listen, if you're 35 or up, it's called a geriatric pregnancy. So I'm thinking these are complications that can potentially happen. But now I'm in this situation where this is our only shot. at having a natural child. This is it. And so that was when I started to feel a little bit of anxiety. Going through the surgery, I wasn't anxious. Going through that whole process, even recovery, I was okay, but it was like the moment when it all hit me that I we don't get to we don't get a do-over if this pregnancy isn't successful. That is when I started to get anxious. And I really had to work through that nervousness and that anxiety because I didn't want that to impact the pregnancy. So I actually was very calm throughout my pregnancy. I, I basically did everything I could do and my pregnancy was pretty good. It was solid. I felt nauseous for about 6 months of it, but I never threw up. I never it never manifested into actual sickness, but I felt nauseous that for so much of the pregnancy. So that happens and I worked out my entire pregnancy because I was already working out. So, the rule of thumb is when you're pregnant, whatever you were doing, you can keep doing. Don't start don't start a workout routine, an intense workout routine if you were not already doing it before you got pregnant. I had already been doing CrossFit for years, lifting heavy and all that stuff. And so thankfully I had great coaches who were in within CrossFit you have something called birth fit. So they were certified and they knew how to support me and help me and make sure that I was doing everything safely. So I was able to do that. And I probably worked out up until week 37, 37, 38. And at that point I was like, all right, enough. Get out here. um, let's go. And he was late. This baby did not want to come. By then, I was just walking every day, trying to do, whatever people say to do to get the baby to come on. So that was all of that's happening. And I'm still I'm mostly thinking about let's get this baby here. Um, but once we get to, I think it's like 27 weeks, once we hit that mark and I knew that the baby can survive at that point, I'm like, "Okay, we're good." Now I'm like, "Okay, maybe we'll get to full term." And then we do, and he's late. So we were 40 weeks and 6 days. We had started to we actually scheduled the C-section for a Monday. So I went to my visits. I had to go to maternal fetal medicine for appointments every week in my 3rd trimester. Every single week, listening for his heartbeat, making sure that he was mobile, making sure that that I was okay, checking my blood pressure, all of that stuff. And so by the time I got to 40, it was 40 weeks, and I think we were at 3 days. And I went to my appointment, and they were like, "All right, let's go ahead and schedule the induction." So I was scheduled to be induced on a Monday. I went to I think that was like a Wednesday or a Thursday that I went to my appointment, and then on Saturday, I started labor at about 7 a.m. And the thing that was so frustrating is that that was one of those I had been up all night. I couldn't really sleep. It was just very uncomfortable. It wasn't it wasn't agonizing or anything. It was very uncomfortable. So this was one of those nights where I was just up. I'm just awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to get comfortable, trying to sleep. And I think I just gotten like exhausted enough that I was like, oh, I'm probably gonna fall asleep. But that had maybe was like 6 or 6:30, and then at 7 o'clock I woke up like, something feels a little different. So yeah, I called the doctor. I was like, so I think I might be in labor. And they told me to come in. And so we got ourselves together. And my mom drove us to the hospital. And I was in labor for, I think, like 14 hours. Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. Mm. No, it was a little longer than that, but in any event, it was somewhere between like 14, 16 hours. But when I got there, we just they kept me comfortable and tried to be as relaxed as possible. Contractions were contracting because those first couple, I was like, "Oh, this isn't so bad," and then they really started hitting, and I was like, "Oh, it's bad. Yep, mm-hmm." And I thought initially that I was gonna be able to give birth without pain meds, and I was like, "Bruh." The hospital I was at, they were like, if you want an epidural, you have to tell us because the doctor, it was the weekend, the doctor was on call, the anesthesiologist that would do the epidural. I was like, nah, like I'm gonna try. And not my husband, my husband um talks about how loud I was. I thought I was like being as calm as possible. I did a lot of like moaning as opposed to like yelling through the contractions and the pain. Anyway, this is really not supposed to be about the birth story, but I was like, "Yeah, can you call him? Can you call him? Cause yeah, I'm gonna need that epi. Hook me up." So yeah, I couldn't bear the pain. And in our birthing classes that we took, the nurse was like, "Just so you know, it's your choice however you want to do this." She said, "But you don't get extra points just for doing it. You don't get extra points for how much pain you can endure. If you want that epidural, get it. If you don't, that's fine." But then I was just like, "Yeah, I don't, I'm just give me that. Give me that epi." So have the baby. He is here. He is healthy. He is safe. I am safe. So I remember thinking like, man, they're just gonna let us leave with this human. like we don't have any tests. We don't have any no exams, no nothing that tells people that we are equipped to do this. This they're just sending us home with this human. Okay, all right, then and off we went. So that was the story of getting through, and then of course I will share another time about what we've been through with our son and how God has blessed him. He was really sick for, I want to say, really his first 2 years, like always. And, I'm talking ambulances and being rushed to the hospital and hospital stays overnight. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. And ultimately, they still don't know what, they still don't know the what, but he has overcome every single obstacle. So he's such a blessing. And I think this is a good place to talk about when I started to feel the impact of secondary infertility. I didn't talk much about, having lost my ovaries or the surgery or any of that. Remember, we are in a global pandemic. My son was born in 2020. So there's a lot happening and it's just it's not a topic that's coming up, right? People would ask, "Are you going to have another one?" I just kind of, just say no. Mm-mm. And I really started to lean into the absolutely not, no possible way, right? And while I do, I do believe that that's pretty true. I don't think even if I could, I would do it again on purpose. But I really leaned into it I realize now to sort of help myself walk through the fact that I couldn't. So when I would feel sick or, I would mention like, oh, I don't feel well, or like my stomach hurts, or I'm feeling tired or whatever. In, in very, like inevitably somebody would say, oh, you gonna have another one? Oh, you pregnant? And it was like, nope, no, I'm not. And even people that I had told that I couldn't have any more children would forget and they would ask. And I would say that was more frustrating than anything because it was hard. I don't think they realized it, but it was hard for me to say it And so when I would tell people, I would tell people that I felt a pretty that were, pretty close to me, and then they would forget and be like, "Oh, you having another?" And I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I told you this. Like, why okay, why are you saying this?" Ah. So that was tough. Then it just put me in a position where I just stopped saying that I didn't feel well because I didn't want anybody to intimate that. And then there will be times where as my child is growing and he's, hitting milestones and things like that, and some things he would do that were maybe a little bit beyond his age, not, maybe a little bit, and they would say, "Oh, you know what that means? That's when they moving out the way for the next one." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Not actually, you know. So it was just those moments that started to make that started to make me feel it, I should say. Although I do not believe they caused the feeling. I think I was just suppressing it, but that definitely made the feelings come forward. So I think, these moments of when I would see people with multiple children or hear people talk about planning for another one, it started to just gnaw at me a little bit. A little, there will be this twinge of, I now know is grief. Every reminder, it would like reopen what I had worked really hard to tuck away. And it was tucked behind, I will never do this again. No way. And again, that is true. But having the choice taken away is what is most painful. You know, sometimes that ache of it all, it sneaks up on me when I see my son is in school now. So, and at his school, these people be having kids. Okay. And yes, bad English intended. Seeing all of these parents with multiples, and parents are always asking me, "Oh, do you only have is he the only one here?" Like, because sometimes they have other littles at home or children that attend other schools, and I'm like, "Oh, he's the only one. He's the only one at all." And so those are the moments that kind of bring it up for me. Also, my son when he started to learn what siblings were, and he would ask questions about a baby being in my belly and things like that, and saying that he wants a sister or a brother. And I can't give him that. Seeing birth announcements for a second or a third child. So yeah, it's like a sting that happens sometimes. And it's not enough for me to like, it doesn't break me down, but it stops me in my tracks sometimes, you know, long enough to remind me of what's not possible anymore. But here's the reality. I'm really grateful. I am, I look at my son, I look at my miracle, and I see God's faithfulness toward us. He was my first and only chance. And somehow and him being our first and only chance feels sacred, right? There is a connectedness, this through line from God to us through him. And I am so grateful that we have him. And so maybe the twinge will show up from time to time throughout my life. Maybe there are going to be things that remind me not of the choice that I don't have from time to time. But I try really hard to settle into just being grateful for what God has given us and the gift that he has given us in our son. And I don't know if I'll ever stop wondering what would have happened if I had been able to make the choice. I'm still I'm probably I don't know that I could have made the choice to have another child on purpose because I just find it mind-boggling. But not having the choice is where the pain comes from for me. Still, I do know that the gift of my son is enough, and I have peace, a peace in that. So The last thing I'll say is going through this process, particularly in moments where the not having the choice has shown up as a hard thing for me. The times when when interactions have brought the feeling forward, those have always been the hardest. Just seeing a picture or seeing a mother with multiples or things like that, those are not as hard to handle. The ones that are hardest are, oh, you having another one? I don't feel well. Girl, I'm you probably pregnant, or, you know, the whole he's moving out of the way for more, would you have more? Those questions are the make things very difficult. So I would ask you to never ask them. And some people will disagree, but because you just don't know where people are in their fertility journeys, don't ask the question. Don't ask anybody if they're having children. Don't ask them if they're having more. If that's something they want to share with you, just let them, but don't ask, please, because you just don't know what that brings up for them. You don't know how hard their next moment. You don't know how hard you saying that will make their next moment. And if you're a good person, and I believe you to be, you don't want to make someone else's life hard. So, again, if someone, if you're close to that person and they feel comfortable sharing about their fertility journey, their family planning journey at all, just let them share. Don't ask the question. You will find that when people want to share, they will. So, be a beacon, somebody that they don't ever have to wonder, like, oh my gosh, I have to worry about what I say because this person is going to relate everything to pregnancy, or they're too probing and they're just going to ask a bunch of questions. You don't want to be that person, the one that gets avoided because you just keep going there. Let's support people, and I think the best way you can support the people in your life who are potentially going to be parents or considering being parents or going through a fertility journey or whatever, the best way you can support them is just by being present and not projecting anything onto them, whether, pray for them, that, pray good things and pray the will of God for their lives, but don't project things onto them. And for goodness sake, please don't voice things that could potentially be harmful. Yeah, that's my story, my strength through it, and my triumph. It's something that I will continue to work through, but it's my journey. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with a guest who's not me. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay unbreakable.